Greetings, everybody! Welcome to Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of darkness today? To enter this world very much like our own and see a little bit of magic there? Yes! We're going to be learning about another of the weavers, crafters, workers of Mage The Ascension, the Taftâni. So if you're ready to travel to this world, I can open up a gate through the gauntlet through time and space, to an alternate reality of supernatural powers, much like our own. Your host and guide here, Dracovin, will grab you by the hand, lead you there. Remember to tip your host, though. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Now, we travel through the gate to the worlds of Mage The Ascension, the world of darkness itself. Well, now that we're here, let's head towards the region of the Middle East, because we're going to be meeting a group of Persian mages, an ancient order that has managed to survive today by intermingling with the cultures within that region and finding ways to survive, even if they have pushed themselves in ways that seem antithesis to many religions. Yes, we're going to be talking about the Taftâni. Now, there are some sources that I can mention here. My favorite, of course, is the M20 book, because it does have an update on them. But of the other books here, you could check the Sorcerer's Crusade Companion. That's more Dark Ages, the Law of Ascension, or Laws of Ascension Companion adds a little bit, but that is also for you doing LARPing. It helps, you know. The Lost Paths, Al-Ibatin, and Taftâni are a good place for earlier editions. Look at them. And of course, the Sorcerer's Storyteller's Companion. Another source that does have some information. Again, I do feel like the M20 is the best bet for looking at the full picture of them, how they are, with the Lost Paths being the second book I would recommend if you need to read up on them more, and especially how to play. So who are the Taftâni? They're also known as the Weavers. They are technically part of the Disparate Alliance as of M20. They've joined this group. They are originally Persian mages. They flout consensus and they have regular practices of vulgar magic. That sounds kind of awful. They've learned how to deal with that. They have an interesting understanding of paradox and how it works, much more than many other mages out there. So keep that in mind. Their knowledge and manipulation of paradox is bar none. Do some things, well, they find ways around. We'll dive fully into it. Now let's talk about their power And when it comes to their power I can kind of give you an overall look at it, but we also have to look at how they've evolved when it comes to M20. I think M20 does the best job of showing us how they evolved in the modern age when it comes to that. A lot of the original pentagram, as we kind of go through, is reflecting them up through the Dark Ages. So it's a dualistic nature. It's rooted in the belief of Asha, a universal truth, and its despised opposite, Druja, the lie. A magician can call forth wonders by manifesting the truth through acts of creation. This could be material, or an item, something ephemeral like poetry, song, even something elaborate, or like a curse. There is some similarities in the way that they practice things to connections of things like the Order of Reason, but it's not going to be technomantic magic that they're mastering. So there is some similarities there, and that comes into play in the modern age, where we see modern Taftâni embracing some use of technology, but they aren't techno-magic. It's a distinction to keep in mind. They hold that's the inspiration and will of magician which calls for the magic, rather than the inherent virtue of the craft itself. So it's still their will, it's just another tool. They all aspire to master spirit, prime, and matter, and this allows them to do one of their major things, which is use spirits and binding of Djinn. Djinn being a basically ancient spirit type, which has disappeared from the world on a whole. It's another one of the bygones, the creatures that were magical on the world that had to disappear from it as consensus kind of threw them out. So, the binding of Djinns is amongst their most powerful secrets. Conventional spirit lore and magic is not really effective against them. And their ancient rules have them kind of need to define them things like bottles, hey, secrets of Djinns, genies in bottles and stuff like that. Yeah. They see them as very dangerous, treacherous, but useful as servants, or especially, because of their danger, binding them, even against their will, to basically control them and keep them from being a danger to people. So this is an old way of thinking that is definitely rooted into their way of doing it. The servitude of the Djinn against their will. Coughing. So, yeah, they remove the Djinn from circulation, force it to work for it, keep it in line. And it's this reason that they are equally measured, despited, hated, and feared by Djinn, Taftâni. Again, though, it is part of their culture and way of thinking, and they see these beings as being very dangerous, whether they are or not. Anyway, because of their view of magic, and the way that it works, they kind of do not view the Ascension War as a struggle between paradigms, but as a war between the truth. But they say that magic is real and an eminent force in the universe, and a lie that there's no such thing as magic. Hey! They believe that magicians have the responsibility to share and show the truth. Using coincidental magic to avoid paradox promotes the lie. And so Taftâni don't really stoop to such. Basically, frequent displays of most flamboyant and vulgar magic in front of the sleeper is good, and helps enlighten them to the truth. Because magic itself is a manifestation of Asha. And they do not pursue ascension as an ideal separate from the study and practice of magic. The term of advancing in magical power is enlightenment, also. So they have this interesting, unique view, which honestly speaking has mostly died off in a lot of these cultures because of the two main groups. The Council of Nine Mystic Traditions, going one direction with magic, and the Technocracy, going in the other direction, and going in another direction. And these two groups have basically cemented what magic is, and there are other ways of looking at it. And that's what the Taftâni kind of show us. Now, this is an older symbol for them. I showed the original current symbol when I first started the kind of lamp. So, they date them back to the seers and sages in ancient Babylon and Sumeria. Experimenting with magic, they discovered that every object carried a measure of Asha within it, and began to weave magic in their personal possessions: swords, carpets, crystals, statues, crystal balls. And then we get to 23,000 BCE. Sargon of Akkad unites these early Taftâni under his rulership, enticing them with promises of wealth, political influence, and their aid. The Akkadians first conquered Mesopotamia. Alright, cool. Now, we have to turn to one of their most historical, influential figures, Solomon. Yes, we're talking about the Hebrew king Solomon. The practices of Taftâni became more and more mundane. Spirits came to resent them for their pride and arrogance. These were the Djinn, who mounted a campaign against mankind to teach them their place. This led them to notice of Solomon, who began to study them, compiling lengthy tomes describing their weaknesses and preferences, and used them to bind Djinn to his will. For Solomon's style of magic, this was still technically more in line with hermetic or cloistered paradigms, but the fact is that the Taftâni learned from his studies and his wisdom to basically bind and control Djinns by millions. It's not a good situation between the two groups. I'm going to say, when you look at it that way. But basically, even today, most versions of Solomonic code are preserved by Taftâni masters. So keep that in mind. So there is still that out there. Then again, whether there's improved relations between the two, that's for M20 to explore. But, Taftâni and Djinn, not good relationships in the early ages. So, during the Arch Ages, the Taftâni were forced to coexist with the monotheistic Muslims. They had a disdain for monotheism as a restriction of freedom, played along, making themselves useful by binding and controlling the Djinns and other spirits. They blocked action to the wandering Bedouin tribes, who basically severed themselves from society and practiced their class. This continued into the Renaissance. Now, they were invited to the Grand Convocation, but they didn't want to attend. They didn't want to sign over their freedom to a council, the way that this was. Again, it's kind of like a Disparate Alliance is that. It's just disparate, kind of disparate. It's a bunch of people that are like, hey, we'll just work together because we can. None of them are signing anything over. They saw joining the Grand Convocation as signing things over, basically. Consensus was still shifting, and paradox was becoming a thing during this time. And amongst the traditions or the reasons, they basically saw the Taftâni because they were old thinking of dying out. But their small enclaves outside of in the uncivilized wilderness survived. We get to modern nights, with the rise of technocracy, and they're in the rural deserts and the mountains, and they are in these areas where the people are, and they can shape the consensus with these people, because they are just people out there not connected with the rest of the world. And they can use vulgar magic and reject technocracy. In the 1978, they were able to use this to their advantage and destroy several technocratic forays into their territories with organized bands of them. They captured and basically took control of, forcefully, a Djinn named Ishikari. Enslaved, basically. Enslaved is probably the best word against the Djinns. I should probably use that one. But in 1991, it became too expensive for the technocracy. They retreated. And basically, the Taftâni have supported a number, during this time period, of groups within the Middle East, of extremists, and things like the Taliban, basically because of the rejection of Western myths. They returned to Petra. They ousted an ancient vampire, Talak, who had a city of the layer. They entered an alliance with Ikhwan al-Safa to combat the vampires of the Middle East, who is the Brothers of Purity, basically a Muslim witch-hunting order. So joined with them for some time. And then we have to really look to M20. Because now things have evolved. Basically, in the last years. Since the 90s. The 90s basically drew them into the light in a lot of ways. And they've had to evolve in a way a little bit rapidly, I would say. But maybe this was coming too. Because now the Taftâni have found the use of things useful. They are in places. Dubai has become a major capital of their operations. There's fantastical business buildings that defy the laws of physics, or they seem to. Oases in the middle of the desert where people can come from all over the world. Yes, people think of that as a miracle of technology. But they don't know the Taftâni, who are now in these oil-rich lands, who are able to channel their arts now, numbers, finance, wonders of technology, basically stealing the technocratic tools. The people that came to invade and attack them, they basically learned to use what was brought against them, against their attackers. So now they have their spirits, the Djinn, and these giant skyscrapers, architectural achievements. And they're all meant to be wondrous versions of their art, rather than technocratic prisons. They are showing their magic to the world. Yes, many may not be able to understand that, but it's there for all to see. That is the Taftâni now. It's something that was basically forced upon them. Now, let's talk about their organization. And we can talk about a couple of their factions, too, before we end it. So, here's an interesting thing about them. They're independent. They don't have houses, they don't have families, they don't have cabals, they don't have anything like that. There are some schools where newly awakened members could learn some ways of old, but in almost every case, a master will have one apprentice at a time, and rarely train more than 3 in a lifetime. And outside that, they really aren't organized. In fact, they can have competition with each other. They came close to extinction. Confronted with the mad djinn of the technocratic order, the corruption of the order's fallen masters. Basically, they had eternal conflict in their old ways. In the old ways, they'd have their old fortresses out in the desert, secluded, living in poverty in the slums, reclusive maids, nomads, basically remnants of a vanishing culture. Where the student-teacher bond was their most important thing. They taught the philosophy, the concepts of magic, their findings, which they didn't really share with each other at all. They basically, if one of them discovered something new, they would keep it to them and only share it with their students. So these were secrets that were only involved with others. And there was rivalries, possibly sometimes duels between them. Effectively, this competition had to end like this. So, it became more stable. And the fight stability has prospered. The competition between the others. Granted, maybe there's not as much sharing between information, but it doesn't mean they could not share information as much anymore as it used to be. It used to be that the secrets were held in belonging, only maybe shared with your students, with your apprentices, because they are your apprentices, only deserving of your great discoveries and secrets that you could share with them. The privilege of these best and bright candidates. Because that's what they used to do, look for the best and bright candidates. And still, they kind of try to do that a little bit. But they did have a meeting, a get-together, if you will, that occurred every 6 months. Bagha. These gardens that occur every 6 months. They all give a meet for a party, brag about their accomplishments, drink, enjoy each other's company. And they were supposed to get rid of their hostilities then, and if you broke that, hey, you might have a duel afterwards. The dueling, the battling, it is gone. The battle and war against the technocrats in their region has ended that. It took between 20 and 30 years to force them a heavy change. But they had to survive. And they have begun to flourish post-war. Now, is that flourishing great? They don't have numbers like they used to. Certainly, back in the old days, they're nowhere near that. Back to the roads of the ancient Persian empires. No. But they are on a rebound that they have not seen in previous generations. In many, many years. Basically, they have learned from facing extinction how to evolve. Because if they weren't going to, they were going to die. So they do have 2 main factions. The Zautar, masters of vulgar magic and spirit forces, are champions against Druj on all fronts. And the Kahim, masters of subtle outs and the spirits of spirits, who pledge himself to the mastery of the spirit world. Again, we kind of have to look at this as the Taftâni have evolved heavily. And let's move to our final talk here about them. They've evolved heavily because they needed to. Their alteration, their changed evolution, was brought about by war against them. Their ability to basically capture and control djinns, to enslave them against their will, is something that came to save them. Because the Technocratic Order was using something against them, something that they had seen more akin to perhaps a monster. But it's also one of those things is perhaps we're seeing an evolution in them nowadays. And maybe their relationship with these spirits. Gone are the days of old in a lot of ways. They still love to flout their magic. And yes, the subtlety of working within consensus is one thing. But rather than doing that, is they find ways to manipulate the very technology to allow them to do their vulgars. They aren't using technology, it's the guise of using it. It's something wondrous, something inspiring, something artful that they're developing, that they're showing off. The eye has become their capital of power now because it needed to. They've returned to civilization because they needed to. And they are finding a way to evolve civilization in their direction. It will be time-consuming. They will have to have more and more generations. But perhaps their goal of returning magic to the world as an everyday, as something people see in front of them and says is real, it's an interesting goal. Consensus is the lie. It is the lie that tricks people. Magic is not real. And the truth is it is, and it's around people at all times. And they are fighting against it. Probably they are one of the few factions fighting against it. And now with the Disparate Alliance, at least to have allies out there against the oncoming onslaughts of the dangers of the world around them, and the other factions that might decide to go against them. That's the Taftâni. I hope you enjoyed joining me on them. They're an interesting group because we know a bit about their M20 timeline, but in that time period, they've had a major cultural shift that makes logical sense because of stuff that's happened. It's one of those ones that I think M20 does shy away from some of the harder language about them, I do have to say, which is something that's very interesting. Having read up it doesn't use some of the language there. But it also, does it acknowledge certain things that exist? There's questions I have about the way that M20 presents it that, I'm just saying. It's interesting. I wouldn't expect anything beyond any rewrites to go better than this, though. They're an interesting group of workers, magicians, and I hope you enjoyed learning about them and inspiring yourself. Anyway, if you want to check out more of my stuff, Internet Adventure Building, over the Dracovin Empire, my schedule goes up on my social medias and my community page over on my YouTube channel. My social medias are Discord, Blue Sky, X/Twitter. They're all linked below, either on my Twitch page or in the description of the video if you're watching this over YouTube. That gives you when I'm live over on Twitch, whether it's recording something related to tabletop, chatting with chat, doing some video games, stuff like that. Any of that, check it out there. Even live plays of shows. All the tabletop and stuff goes up on YouTube. That schedule upload. I also let people. Changes the schedule do happen. A lot more on the Twitch side than the YouTube side. YouTube side usually does video issues, all that kind of stuff. And those social media are a great place to check out more stuff on me. What do you think about the Taftâni? How do you think they've evolved in their relationship with the Djinn? I would like to see that with their evolution and forced changes, that maybe they would be more akin to, rather than forcing the Djinn, maybe making deals or negotiations with them, because they are entering into a business world. So it might be more logical that their relationship with the Djinn changes, because it needs to. I don't know. But then again, I haven't really researched heavily into Djinn. The misgivings, the prejudices they have against them might be accurate. I don't know. But they don't come to our world much anymore anyway, whether the Taftâni summon them. Like many of those bygone creatures that can no longer enter the consensus of things. Yeah. I'm just curious what your thoughts on it. Yeah. And then, anyway, I'm going to go on. We'll hang out with Twitch chat and stuff like that. record some more videos, do some more stuff. But until the next time we chat, hang out, answer questions like this, get into things, I bid all of you out there adieu and wonderful.
So,